Since the civil rights era, the 60s, um, we had the 70s, we had the 80s, we had the 90s, we had the 2000s. And all of those have produced different kinds of churches for African Americans, for black people, right? But we keep thinking about foot stomping, hand clapping church when we think of the black church. And so one of the things I wanted to do was like, all right, so what are the different types? If you're not familiar with it, what are the different types of church? Because Charlie, you know, people say to us, we don't sound at Epiphany, we don't sound like a regular church. Why don't y'all do it like this, that, and the third? And a lot of times they're referring back to their grandma's church that they grew up in their childhood, as if there's not been a 30-year gap in between. So one of the things I wanted to do was just explore with you um, what are some of these different types of churches. Now, first type of church I see in the black community is this, the traditional church. This is the church you think of when you think of black church. Most of us, that was a Mount Pleasant, a Mount Sinai, Missionary Baptist, so and so AME Church, all of that kind of stuff. You think of hooping. You think of church hats and church ladies, deacon boards, junior deacons. You think of that. This is kind of that traditional church. A lot of the people, the pastor, probably 60s plus. You know what I'm saying? Know what I'm saying? And so there's that kind of traditional ethic, way of doing church, expectations, all of those things. The types of preachers you're looking at are like T.D. Jakes. You know what I'm saying? That's who you initially think of. And those churches are in almost every city. Every community has that pastor or those pastors. They dress like this, they drive like this, they talk like this. You got that. You got the traditional church. But there's another kind of church that's in the black community that's very prevalent, and that is the new school church. And many of the folks that go to these churches are in their 50s and in their 40s. All right? And so these, what I would categorize these as, is they're traditional. They're going to sing a lot of the hymns. You might have some choirs, stuff like that. But they're going to wear jeans instead of a suit. They're going to wear a suit jacket, sport coat with the jeans underneath, right? And you're going to hear them talk a lot about marriage and relationships and you know what I mean? But they're going to use a lot of the traditional language in their gatherings and their services. There's still going to be this appeal to traditionalism, but with some new, more relevant attempts to be more relevant to the community. So you think about pastors like E. Dewey Smith and Freddie Haynes and R.A. Vernon, stuff like that, where they're really stepping out there and pushing against the grain. And you're like, man, this is a dope pastor, preacher. They might be a little old school for us as younger folk, but then in reality, they've become more relevant, but still use a lot of that traditional lingo and language to bridge that gap. Now, the next category I think we have is what I've termed as the contemporary black church. All right, contemporary black church, and the contemporary black church is they've gone all in, chips all in on making sure that they are super relevant, super cool, super dope. The production value is very high. They use today's lingo. There's a lot of, probably a lot of charismatic theology. No slight, no shade, no nothing. I'm just giving you descriptors of different types of churches, right? So when I think about the contemporary church, these like super new school, the pastor might get featured on Preachers and Sneakers, something like that. Think about Mike Todd, right? I think about the production value. I think about the way he talks. I think about the sermon series and the packaging, the social media presence. You think about somebody like Stephen Furtick even. So you're going to have a lot more diversity and cultural diversity and ethnic diversity within the church, right? You think about all those different styles. So that's contemporary, and those are up-and-coming churches. And the last kind of group we see in the black community is more of the group that we at Epiphany and some of the other guys that I work with, we kind of come from. And those will be considered outsiders, right? So outsiders are, you can't quite put your finger on where they land. They know the lingo in the language, but maybe their theological explanation is a lot more robust. Maybe they don't use the same syntax. You probably won't hear hooping, or you will. It'll probably be very rare. They're going to be a lot more probably diverse or whatever in their expression. And so these are a lot of young church plants that are coming out of the gate right now. Many of the leaders in their late 20s, 30s to 40s. They're probably in different neighborhoods. They probably have different formation pathways, and spiritual formation and all that stuff is an emphasis. They talk about culturally relevant issues. Their cultural positioning is more authentic to who they are. They're not putting on. They're just themselves because they've been shaped by hip hop and urban culture. So those are outsiders. And so when I'm talking about there's a diversity of different churches in the black community, there's even a lot more than what I just said. I just gave you a few: traditional, new school, contemporary, and then these kind of burgeoning outsiders that you probably never heard of before, but that are making their way into the ecosystem. So keep your eye out. Let me know if you've seen some of these, experienced some of these. And yeah, I think this is just a helpful way to think about the diversity of churches when we talk about black people. Yo, thanks so much for watching. This your man Charlie, a.k.a. Charlie Hustle, a.k.a. The Hope Hustler. And I want you to like, subscribe for more to stay up with us.